Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Sober Spartan podcast. I'm your host, as always, Andrew Nicholls, and today I got a real treat for you. I got some random guy I picked off the street. I don't know who he is. I don't never even met him before in my life. Coming to talk to you. I'm just kidding. It's my brother. I've known him a long time. But Kris, I'm going to pass this off to you and just give our listeners a little bit of a high level overview about who you are and like that kind of thing. Who the fuck are you?
So my name obviously is Kris Nicholls. That's an easy one. When it boils down to who I am, I find I'm more of an eccentric individual, and that kind of thing. So I definitely big thinker. So a lot of these topics will definitely come easy to me, that kind of thing. So I always enjoy these type of things, and definitely got a diverse list of things that I like, from photography to psychology and everything, everything in between, kind of thing, right? So definitely an out there kind of individual, as far as I've been told anyway. So
Yeah, I can agree with that for sure.
yeah,
Absolutely.
no.
But I pretty much because obviously I know you and I know you have one hell of a story. So that's why I wanted to ask you on and get you on here because I know like just from growing up, all the shit that we went through and that kind of thing, and our journeys in getting sober and that kind of stuff. I think you have a lot that you can teach other people with your story and stuff like that. So what I kind of want to start with is like, what was your life before that you decided to get sober? Like, what were your like daily routines, relationships, like work, that kind of thing? Just kind of go into a little bit deeper about that.
Yeah, of course. Well, see, before I stopped drinking and everything like that, it's one of those things. The only real way I can describe my life before I stopped and started taking charge of myself is simply chaos. When I really try to think back on things, it's like a lot of my memories come in snippets, because I don't remember a whole lot. There was a lot of time I spent where my only really real routine was make sure that I have a job so I can have money so that I can drink. You know what I mean? So it was kind of one of those things that I never even realized until after I made the choice to give all that up, that I really was more or less just a shell of an individual, where I didn't know myself. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself for the rest of my life, because at the time, you know, because I was enthralled with chaos all the time, and such a selfish person, me was the only person that mattered. And if I'm not getting what I want, then I'm going to go and get it somewhere else, And
Mhm.
so in hindsight, it's one of those things where I realized that I did take advantage of a lot of people. And, it was something I always wondered while I was in the problem, is like, I can get along with people and I can be, part of a group and everything, but nobody trusted me, and it's kind of, unless they knew that I was going to be on their side with whatever it is that's going on, they'd let me help them, because they know I could be a ruthless son of a bitch about shit sometimes, right? But
Mhm.
when it came down to the trust aspect, you know, people would know that if I'm going to bat for them, it's going to be beneficial for them. But at any moment, I could easily turn around and bite them. You know what I mean? Like, I had friends that were supposed to be my best friends in the world, and time again, they would say one thing that my mind in a drunken state would think is out of line, and I would smack that person up. You know what I mean? Like, and those are supposed to be my best friends, right? Even one of them doing me a solid in the past, I was shit faced and I had no business walking anywhere. And my house was a long ways away, and sure, the one guy who wasn't drinking at the time, because he just got there from work, decides, well, we've been friends since elementary school. I'll do you the solid and I'll drive you home, because you ain't making it fucking anywhere. So it's kind of thing. So then it kind of one of those situations where I remember what I did on that ride home, but I don't, for the life of me, remember why. And as far as I've been told after the fact, there was no reason. And literally within 5 minutes of being in his car, I've got the seat all the way back and my feet were
Sorry.
trying to boot his fucking windshield out, and it got to
Hmm.
the point where he had to get off the road because I was going to make us both fucking crash, and next thing I know, he's got my seatbelt unbuckled and he's on the other side of the car throwing me out of there and saying, I tried to help you, man. And then at the time, obviously I was out of line, but my mind was not telling me that it was me out of line. Now it's a him problem. And the next time I see you, buddy, you better fucking make sure I'm sober because I will probably beat the shit out of you. And that's supposed to be, one of my best friends, right? So it was like, it took a really long time and a number of different tries for me to realize that what was one of my key issues was the mental state that, being in a drunken state all the time. Like there was not much time of the day. Like I would wake up and I'd sometimes still be half cut, but I would go to work and then it would
Hmm.
sort of fade away. But by the time I'm like starting to feel a slight hangover come on, I'm
Yeah.
already fucking turning her down, and now I'm not feeling any pain or whatever, right? So,
Hmm.
it just when I really look back at some of the things that I can remember before I stopped doing like drinking and all that, that was the center of my life. Like I thought there was people that mattered to me, but you know, what really mattered was just making sure that I've got my habit covered, and
Yeah.
so I realized this a few times, but not with didn't, think about it deep enough to really realize certain things. So it actually took me a number of shots to, I would tell myself, okay, well, I'm going to stop. But then I would end up around the same people. And of course, they're
Hmm.
drinking. And for me, just seeing it at that stage of trying to not drink was exponentially harder, especially because of the fact that, you know, though the people that I was around would know that, yeah, this guy shouldn't really be doing that, they would always encourage me to. No one really supported the not drinking and everything like that, right? Because
Hmm.
I can't even count the amount of people's houses I was never allowed to set foot in again. All the
Yeah.
places I would get banned from or kicked out of, or you know, anything like that. And it's like, even in a situation where I've gotten kicked out of establishments, I was causing a scene, because
Hmm.
like you can't kick me out. Like, what the hell? And instead of, having a number of people say, like, dude, calm down. Seriously, you are in the wrong. Then it in that mindset, it was like a personal attack. So now the establishment is on my shit list. And not only that,
Yeah.
but everyone who's supposed to be my friend that's there that's trying to diffuse the situation is now on their side, part of that shit list, right? So, I definitely treated a lot of people who only tried to help me with some serious disrespect. And at the time, I didn't give a fuck about that. Like, who cares what you think? Like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And that was my mentality, right? And, it
Hmm.
after a while, like people just kind of got used to it, which is a sad thing to say. But, you know, then I would end up being phased out. And it was kind of like, then I started to realize that I don't actually have myself a core group of friends. I just had a number of friend groups that when one of them would get tired of me being chaotic and insane, I would just move on to the next group of people and wear these ones
And how
out.
did you feel at that time when like these friends were like kind of pushing you out of the group? Like in that moment, like what did you think?
Well, see, and the thing about that is at the time, it wasn't a matter of like me thinking like, oh, it's a me problem. It's like, oh, these people are boring. So I
Hmm.
wouldn't allow myself to understand that, yeah, Kris, you're the problem, dude. No, it was like, okay, well, these people are fucking squares. They're boring the shit out of me. Now I'm going to go find out who's doing something better. Right.
Yeah.
Because to me at
Hmm.
the time, doing something better was just not complaining and being a part of the chaos. So again, I was a terrible influence on people because if they wouldn't do the things that I was willing to do, on any standpoint, you're now a bitch and I'm going to make fun of you, right? So
Hmm.
some people would even try to stop drinking early because they know they've had enough. And in my
Yeah.
world, there was no such thing as enough. And if you're not keeping up with me, I'm going to fucking make you, whether it's in your best interest or not, like,
Uh-huh.
and just say, like, especially when someone else is also, inebriated and in a bit of a state where, especially, they know they've had enough. For me, it was always a challenge to push them more and make this person pass out. And a lot of the times I would do that, which is very dangerous, and I would leave.
Mhm.
I would
Yeah.
disappear, go find someone else to hang out with while this person is now passed out by themselves, and I left them there, you know, and that kind of thing, right? So it's like one of those situations where I did some pretty shitty things to people. And in
Mhm.
turn, because I had done those shitty things to people, it would happen right back to me. Like I would get shit faced and be left places and wake up the next day in the middle of a prickle bush or something, like I've been in some pretty
Been there.
awkwardly spots, but it's like the next day when I wake up and I'm all in a fuzz or something, it's like, how could these assholes leave me here? Like, what the fuck is wrong with them? And never in my mind at the time did I ever consider how many times I've done shit like that to other people.
Do what I say, not what I do.
That's exactly right. And once you
Mhm.
get, like once your life centers around being drunk, your mind is always in a bit of a fog. Even when I had my period, like moments of being not drunk or whatever, I was still dazed by it. Like I never fully like cleared my mind at all, and
Yeah.
even after a number of different attempts to try to stop, um, I would always end up like in a situation where I just get so pissed off and down on myself and everything like that. So then it would lead me right back in,
Mhm.
and it was like all I wanted at one period of time was to be out of that, to stop doing it
Mhm.
because I can't handle being a shitty person. And then I would end up feeling the effects of like being such a high intake drinker to having none, and then all of the downer effects would happen within my brain, causing me to twist my own opinions of myself even, and like basically trick myself into believing that I needed to do that. And
Yeah.
then it got me into the habit of thinking, okay, well, who cares about the rest of my life? I'm just going to do this and I'm probably going to die young. Like, whatever. Right. And that became the mentality. And it's like so many times of just trying. And in hindsight now, at the time I felt I was trying, but I was really I was just tricking myself into believing I was trying. And I would tell myself, well, you've taken a week, you'll be fine, right? You can
Mhm.
do it a little bit, right? But then that little bit, never is a little bit. And then it even saying like I could do it a little bit and do it once in a while. And it's like I totally know full well that some people can do that, right? But I didn't even want to entertain the fact that I'm not one of those
Mhm.
people, right? Like,
Yeah.
for me, it was the logic behind, well, moderation is something I can learn. I can learn whatever I choose, and I can learn to moderate. But, especially once I get to a point and I've had a few, there's like that mental switch that would flip where it's like when I'm not drunk, I'm not confident at all. And as soon as the drunken confidence kicks in, that's when it's like, okay, well, I don't, I'm the one telling me these things. I don't have to listen to me. Who the fuck am I? Like that kind of thing, right? So it was kind of like even me poking the bear to myself about these things. And it was kind of like, okay, so that's what ended up causing me to try a bunch of times, and that kind of thing. And it's
And how
like,
many times have you tried to get sober? Like, if you were to think about it.
if I were to think about it before the the really big one where I actually realized some things was probably about
Mhm.
4 separate times. And on the
Yeah,
fourth,
I
so
was in the same thing. I did about 4 real kicks at the can before it actually ended up sticking.
yeah, so then by the fourth, attempt, I went to drastic measures. Like I
Mhm.
turned my phone off every day. I went to work, I went home, I avoided everybody. I basically became a hermit. Like I would
Yeah.
not answer my phone because I know people want to go and do this, that, or the other, right? I know it always involved
Hmm.
drinking. And even if, because at the beginning, I did want to go and do all the stuff with these people and everything, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, hey, who doesn't want to go have some fun? But at the time, I didn't trust myself at all. I knew full
Hmm.
well that if I'm there for more than 10 minutes, and I'm watching everyone else drink and everything like that, my mind would start saying, well, why can they and I can't? Like,
Yeah.
what is that about? And then knowing full well that I wouldn't be able, like, to trust myself to not partake in this, because at even in situations like that where I'd go to parties and I would only bring a little bit of my own shit and I would just take shit from other people, right? Like, so everywhere I go, there was always something to be had that I could have for free, whether it was, someone just basically telling me I can have it, knowing I'm probably going to raid the fridge anyway, right? Like, there would be so many times I'd be at a house party and cliche as it may sound, I would steal liquor and help them look for it. You know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
was just, I would take the whole 2-6 bottle, and that kind of thing. When someone told me I could have a drink out of it, okay, good. I'll go make the drink and then put the bottle off away. And then it's like I would go and sneak off and have little bits and little bits while everyone's fucking walking around the house looking for the bottle of Silent Sam. Meanwhile, I know exactly where it is and you ain't having it. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
it's like when I was when I stopped talking to people and just keeping solely to myself out of a move of desperation, knowing I couldn't trust myself, I would remember these things and think like, you know, if I could go to a place with people that are supposed to be my friends, yet I could screw them over and just take their stuff without asking, or ask and then say, yeah, I put it back, and nobody would really question me because they know that I would get violent really quickly. Like whether it be verbally, or a lot of the times too, I would hit people or something like that, right? Or smash people's stuff, or just get very, very,
Yeah.
uh, very
I've seen
rude
that
about it,
firsthand
right?
actually too.
Exactly, and it's like, it really took me understanding these things, like the hows of and the whys of like what I was actually like, because again, like I said, it kind of borders around the idea that I didn't even really know myself, apart from
Hmm.
how I can go south very quickly. That I knew full well.
Yeah.
But again, even though I knew it and I was aware of it, and I told myself I wanted to change, it was kind of one of those situations where, I didn't really fully buy it. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
I I
100%.
would outwardly say that to people and I would think it when I'm alone, but I would always have an extra internal dialogue going that's like, that ain't reality. That's not true. You're not any different than anyone else and they can all do it. So then at the time I had what I guess I would explain as a bit of a God complex. I was always thinking, well, I'm fucking better than you. So if you can do it, I can do it better. And of course, doing it better meant in excess and then losing control, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just when I really think about it, the sad part is that a lot of my memories are only bit bit piece with huge gaps and stuff,
Yeah.
and then I would look at situations where, you know, uh, when we lived in that dungeon house at the end of number 3 road, I was
Yeah.
on my way home and I got
In Richmond, right?
absolutely, oh yeah, absolutely mangled. And I got a bus to the bus stop I needed to transfer at. But by the time that bus got there, the one I needed to transfer to had gone for the night and it wasn't running anymore. So I was sitting there like shit faced out of my mind, clueless. And then the cops pull up on me, right? And it's kind of like, okay, whatever. So they're asking me where I'm going. And at first I was like, I ain't telling you shit. Like, again, part of that mentality. So eventually they're like, well, you're either coming with us or you're gonna have a little bit of a give us some information here. So I explained, I'm just waiting for the bus so you guys can fuck off, right? Like, they didn't like that mentality. So they're kind of like, okay, well, for one, you're seeming very belligerent and all this sort of stuff. Uh, you're definitely out of line right now. Where, like, is there someone at home where you're going? Because we cannot, really, we can't put you, like, have you go somewhere in your state and
I
you
actually
be
think I
alone.
remember that now.
And so I said, yes, my brother is at home, but I look at the clock and I'm like, I didn't even realize this, but it's fucking 3 a.m., you cops. What are you guys doing out here? So then I started trying to turn it around on them, but then it ended up being to the point where, okay, we've got to call your brother. And if he answers the phone, we're going to take you home. Oh my God, you did not answer the phone because you were sleeping, right? Like,
Yeah.
then I'm starting to get pissed off at you. Like, why are you fucking sleeping at 3:30 in the morning? Like, what's wrong with you? But then it's like, okay. And sure enough, we did get you on the phone. Now, as far as they told you, from what I remember, I was coming home. They were going to drop me off, and only because you were there and would be able to make sure I don't fucking do anything retarded. Um, and now I have no idea what the hell happened between the time we hung up the phone and I got into their car. But before, the last thing I remember was hanging up the phone and going to get in the car. And then that's where the snippets kick in. So I remember
Mhm.
being in an absolute rage in the back of their car, boot fucking everything, punching shit, screaming, fucking you name it. Like, it looked like they just abducted a mental ward patient. Like, it was
Mhm.
ridiculous, and like, so I remember bits and pieces, but then I don't really remember. And then I remember getting taken into the police station. And now that in itself was an ordeal because they were obviously, you go in there, you've got to do what they say, and then they got to get you into a cell, and that means taking all your stuff. Now, in that state, I feel so bad for those guys because all they were trying to do was their job. But for me, it's like, you ain't taking nothing from me. You know what I mean? Or I
Yeah.
certainly won't be giving it to you. So you have to try to take it from me. Right. And that doesn't go over well in a police station. So it got to the
Nope.
point where I halfways complied with most stuff until the point happened where they decided they wanted my belt. And it's like, that's when I threw my hands in the air and said, oh yeah, you want my belt? You better get on your knees and take it from me, boy. And it's like, they're like, what the fuck? I'm like, yeah, my pants are too big. This belt keeps them up. So you get on your knees, you can have my belt. And so they're like, okay, this is ridiculous. Whatever. So the one guy's holding my hands above my head, like I'm doing one of those. He's behind me holding my hands so I don't do anything to this guy. He takes my belt and my pants fall to the floor. And then I start exclaiming, like, dude, look at you guys. You're not only, you're on your knees and you're fucking right there. The pants did half the work for you. And so then I start exclaiming to these people and derogatory comments, calling them this, that, and the other, and everything like
Yeah.
that. And it's just like, in my mind now, I remember parts of this situation, and it's like, I'm not I'm not that person. Like, who the fuck was that guy? You know
No.
what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
the hindsight was definitely some of these things I remember doing, but they're like, I remember doing these things, but they don't feel like me. And that's when I really realized that, like, okay, I really gotta think here and like pick apart what's actually going on, because I can't I can't keep doing this. Because even that day I didn't know what day it was. And I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be to work tomorrow or if tomorrow's a weekend. I don't even know what day it is today, to be honest, because it was a couple of
Mhm.
days that I was off the Richter for a couple of days that at that period. And so trying to get their attention to ask them what day it was, they're like, okay, well, we were going to let you out early in the morning, but now we're going to keep you longer. So now you're not getting out tomorrow morning. We're not telling you what day it is because you've done this to yourself and you're in here now until we let
Mhm.
you out. And it was like, to me, it was like, okay, well, I had a lot of time to think, and I wish I had a clearer mind in that moment to be able to think properly. But realistically, it was kind of one of those things where by the time I was walking out of there the next day, I didn't even know where I was. Like, I knew I was at a police station, but I didn't know which city it was in. Like, in the metropolitan area of Vancouver, there's all kinds of different places where you could be. I had no idea where I was. So then
Yeah.
they let me out a back door, and I've never been there before. And as soon as I finally walked a couple of blocks, I realized where I was. And, kind of one of those things where it's like, I started saying to myself, you're an idiot. Like, what is wrong with you? And it kind of, that was one that usually sticks in my mind because of how absolutely evident the mindset that I would get into with the alcohol would be for me, right? And and that's just after that incident there, it was just like I really, really, really have to sort something out. And at the time, I didn't even know exactly, because then I was also doing drugs and other things. So I was just thinking like
Yeah.
maybe that's the problem, but then it's like stopping everything and avoiding every person. It wasn't until you and Dylan, uh, I had chatted with you guys, and you guys were on the same thing because again, also knew that you guys were on the same level. Like we were all doing the same kind of stuff with the same kind of
Dumb
people.
shit. Yeah.
And at the time, I thought I was enjoying it, and sure, yeah, great stories, good time, whatever. Like as far as
But you barely
entertainment
remember.
value goes, but when it comes down to the reality of it, like it wasn't a good time, like always being in a state where like it was a constant state of I need something now. Like whether I don't have enough in me or I feel horridly sick because I need something now. Like I've actually
Mhm.
physically had to leave work a number of times to go down the street to the liquor store, and like I
Yeah.
would tell them I'm sick or whatever, like I don't feel good, I gotta go
Mhm.
home. I would go to the liquor store, go home, and then get shit faced and do whatever, right? Call people up like, hey, I got off work early. These guys are idiots, like stuff like that, right? So when
Mhm.
I really took all the pieces of the puzzle being the chaos that I was experiencing, the annoyance that the chaos caused me, and then the sheer feeling that I had all the time from a health standpoint was terrible, and it's like one of
Yeah.
these, I was always telling myself, one of these days you're going to choke on your own vomit and die, buddy. Like, I would seriously say that to myself, but again, I would brush it off the shoulder and keep going on. And so that's why it was not until I, you and Dylan were sort of going down the same road. For me, what it took was having someone to do that with as well, which, I
Mhm.
probably would have found somewhere, whatever. But even just the brotherhood that we built between the three of us at the time was what it required because I couldn't find a way to do something with people that I knew would be drinking somewhere or that would want to go and
Yeah.
do something involving drinking. Like my requirement at the time was I can't hang out with people if they're going to be doing that because I know me and I know I will just give up on what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And then I just spent months sitting at home talking to no one for no reason, So to me, I also had to build in the idea that I've now been doing this for a little bit. I don't want to waste my time, So it was kind of a mix of things that actually helped me stay that way. But then once I actually started to be around more people that were sober and that kind of thing, that I realized, okay, well, that's there's people out there that don't drink, you know what I mean? Like I always
Yeah.
felt really, especially at the beginning, it was really annoying because of the fact that I would be the weird one for not drinking, though all the people that would think it's weird that I'm not drinking know full well that I shouldn't be drinking, and I've probably hit a bunch of them a number of times because I was shit faced drunk and out of my mind. So like it's just kind of one of those awkward things to think about because of the fact that alcohol itself is so socially acceptable and it's absolutely everywhere, and it's not any one second thought to be offering someone who shows up to a barbecue or something a beer, right?
No.
Or people I encounter to this day, that don't really know I drink. you know, if someone's like, oh, we got to get a beer one of these days, right? I always have to explain to them, well, I get the phrase, I'll show up, will you have a beer and I'll have a water, you know, and then I get chances to talk to people about that. But even to this day, people I haven't seen uh, since like the first couple of years after high school, you know, they honestly finding out that I don't drink now are like, we never thought that would happen. Like, honestly, we
Mhm.
thought you're a lifer, you know, and at, at the even at the beginning, I felt like giving up all the time and thinking, you know what, maybe I am a lifer, you know, maybe I better just do this and then I won't have to
Yeah.
put up with my fucking annoying self for much longer because it will get me one of these days. And whether that be the drinking itself or the situations I would find myself in because of that, you know, like there would be
Yeah.
times where I'm in the middle of Vancouver, I don't really know it too well, and then I go pick a fight with 464 roid monkeys, right? And I get
Mhm.
my fucking face beat in. And then I'm jumping on them, blowing my blood all over them, yelling, you don't know where I've been. I've got AIDS because I saw it on a fucking TV show. And
Yeah.
then, of course, the cops end up being there. And then I get in trouble again. And like, oh man, it's just all these different situations where it's like I could have really got my ass fucking handed to me because these
Oh
dudes
yeah.
were huge. And not only
Mhm.
that, but I'm not very big. I'm fucking 5'9" on a good day. You know, like I may be a tough little guy, but you know, you get 6'4" roid monkey jack looking dudes that are huge, and you can't really like. I had at the time too. My friend Kyle was down the road because I was getting him to talk to me on the phone because I had no idea where I was going, and he was trying to tell me how to get there. And so as soon as he realized that, oh, I see you right there up the street, and you know, I'm like, okay, I see him. So then I go like, okay, well, I'm gonna hang up the phone. I go to hang it up, and then I didn't actually hang it up. I just sort of put it to the side because I noticed that these four dudes on the corner are looking
Mhm.
at me, right? And that's what it would take sometimes is someone to look at me. And it's like,
Mhm.
now I'm fucking freaking out. And so I walk right up to them into the middle of all four of them. So they're now surrounding me by my choice. And I hear my buddy Kyle down the street yelling, no, no. And he's fucking screaming at the top of his lungs because he knows I'm about to provoke these humans. Right. And it's
Mhm.
like sometimes I can remember these situations, these snippets, and think like I must have been out of my absolute noodle doing some of this
And you
stuff, right?
were.
But
You were.
and it's just baffling how to me like the chaos was so normal for a lot of situations that once I started to become a little more clear and have like try to organize my life, it's the organization and the routine and things that are good for me. At the time, they were chaos to me. You know, like I was so used to my own brand of chaos that normal stuff and normal routines and everything that was complete gibberish to me. You know, like it just none of it made any sense whatsoever. And then it's like my mind started to clear up and I started to realize that yeah,
It happens.
routine and habits are a good thing as long as they're not, you know, vice type habits like drinking, of
Yeah.
course. So I mean it's kind of like it really took a lot of thinking about what I was able to actually remember, but then it also took realizing that there's a lot of my life that I do not remember. Period. You know, like even I didn't start drinking until like so I was in grade 9. I don't whatever age 14, 13, 14.
14.
Anyways, it was New Year's of grade 9 and all of my friends started grade 8 whatever. And I always said no, you know, like I'm not doing that. And I held off longer than a lot of people that I knew.
Mhm.
But once I started, it progressed way faster than everybody that I knew. You know, like
Mhm.
it got to the point where, you know, I would go and then they would be all tapped out. And it's like, I'm not ready to stop yet. So then that's when I would go to the next, call up the next people that I know that are
Mhm.
probably still awake or still doing whatever and float around, right? So it was like,
Yeah, I've been there for sure.
oh yeah. And there was even periods of time where it's like, okay, well, I don't need to sleep much, so I can just keep doing whatever it is that I do. So then there would be days where I would go to my job. At the time I was working 12 hours, and then I would stay up the remaining 12 hours, and then not like I would stop about drinking about 5, so I had about, an hour and a half to clear up a little bit by the time I get to work, and then work 12
Yeah,
hours and then
that
go
gives me
right out the next.
flashbacks.
Exactly, right? So it's like I had to maintain this weird level of carrying the drunkenness through, otherwise it would just hit me like a ton of bricks, right? And then it
Hmm.
got to the point where the hangovers were lasting 2 or 3 days, where I would feel hungover even when I'm drinking, and it's like, oh man, I got to drink more now because I got to get rid of this headache, right? And
Yeah.
of course, in my mind at the time, the drinking would get rid of the headache eventually if I drank enough. But again, that's where it started to get more and more dangerous, because my answer to everything that I realized was, um, drinking was the answer, right? So I get upset,
Hmm.
drink more. I'm
Yep.
in pain, drink more. This everything, the answer was more alcohol, right? And especially because it was so socially acceptable, I didn't have to even hide it from anyone. I just had to hide the amount, right? So like a lot of the times people would ask me if I'd been drinking before I come. Like they'd ask me the question, have you been pre-gaming? Because that's what I would say to everybody is, I'm pre-gaming right
Yeah.
now. And then I'd down up whatever I got at my house, go past the liquor store to bring booze to the party so that I could really
Hmm.
get drunk. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
I had to get a certain level of drunk by myself before I could even start being around other people too. Because then if I was not, like, if I was too sober, then I would just start to get anxious and like more introverted and not want to actually go and be around people. But
Hmm.
then it was like, okay, well, that just means I need a couple more pregame drinks, right? A couple more of these. And to get myself like people oriented kind of thing. Like it was really, really not good, and it's like
No,
it never really
you
became
think it is at
fully.
the time, but it's not.
Well, exactly. And it was like, I've got the cure all right here, and they sell it at every BC liquor store or every liquor store. There's all of them. Some even have drive-throughs, that kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
thing, right?
This
Like it
is
just, dude. And that's why I always think to myself, like, I didn't even have enough clarity and enough uh, time where I'm not actually drunk, or like in some way where I was able to go and get my driver's license, right? Because it's like
oh,
every time
fuck.
I booked the test a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
And like the licensing system we have here, you've got to go through a couple of different steps, like a learners and stuff, right? Obviously, that. And I
Hmm.
had my learners for like 5 years, because I could do that test drunk, no problem. You go in and you write a test. Like I ain't driving nowhere; they can't do nothing. So I do that and keep a learner's one on the go. But I always, to this day, thank myself so much for, or appreciate that I didn't actually have a driver's license, because even without one, I would con people into letting me drive their cars when I was drunk. So by the time I went to
Hmm.
go do my licensing test, uh, I'd only driven 10 times, and 9 of them I was not in any shape to be driving, and I didn't follow a single rule. And it was just, it was reckless, and I know full well, because obviously, as you know, there have been people in some of our friend groups that have got caught drinking and driving, and they ain't with us
Oh,
no
yeah.
more, right? So, I
No.
mean, in my mind, at this current moment in time, it's like I thank myself every day for not going and getting my license, because I probably would have ended up in that same thing. Because a lot of the times too, it's like I know full well that I would tell myself I'm fine to drive, and I know I wouldn't be. Like, even when I remember conning people into letting me drive their vehicles because they were drunk, I just
Yeah.
told them I could handle my drunk better, so you just let me drive the car and we'll be fine, right? I didn't. It was like one of those things. Like I say, sometimes it borders back down to like something of a God complex in a sense where
Yeah.
you
We
may
all
not
think we're
feel you're
Superman when we get
comfortable.
drunk.
Yeah, and it's like you may not be comfortable to do it, but I know I can fucking do it, right? And it's like, yeah, you think so, buddy? Like in my mind, it was just the rationale behind it was just me not wanting anyone or not, like not being willing to let anyone say I can't do it. And even if they say they can't do it and be responsible, fuck you, I'm irresponsible and I'm going to do it anyway. Right. Like, and
Yeah.
that's what gets people killed. Right. And I
Hmm.
just, like I said, certain aspects of how life was before I stopped drinking and all that, was just absolute chaos. And more often than not, if I would ask somebody to do something or for something or to let me drive their car when I'm shit faced, I would ask them once and then I would tell them if they said no because I didn't like anyone saying no to me. And that again, that's how people get in trouble or killed or whatever, right? So, like I said, I took a number of shots, but it was October 5th, 2015 or 2013 was the time when I actually, because the day before that actually was the Landing Pub in Ladner.
I was
And
gonna actually bring that up and see if you
yeah,
even remembered that, because like that's the insanity of like how socially acceptable it was and like where I was at that time. Because like at that time, like I pretty much got you to come, and I was calling you a pussy, and I was like,
as
because
I
for me
wasn't
at that
drink, I
time,
was
it wasn't normal for someone to quit drinking, right?
well, and I wasn't drinking at the time either, or trying not to. But
Yeah,
then it got hit my ears that there was going to be 50-cent beers,
yeah. And I said I would pay for them
and it was like,
to get you
oh
to
my
come.
god. So of course,
It was like '80s night or something.
yeah, something like that. Like they were doing a flashback
It
70s
was super
prices or
cheap.
some shit like that. So it was like,
Hmm.
okay. And then they tried to tell me, oh, well, you can only have two at a time. So, okay, bring me two. And then I'd slam one, take this one away, bring me two more. This one will be gone by the time you get back. Right. And
Yeah.
holy, like, what did we get there at like 11 when they opened?
We got it right when they opened. We had to get in because, and then there's people waiting outside like for so long because they only could have a certain amount of people in. But we
Yeah,
made sure because like, we planned it out. We're like, we got to be there right as soon as they open, and we're gonna stay till closing.
exactly. And, we had a day there. And I think as far as I can remember, I disappeared from there at about
You
6.
disappeared. Yeah, you were
At
gone.
about 6 o'clock. And you know what? I remember in my mind being in there thinking I'm gonna go somewhere. I don't know where. And I don't remember fuck all until about 3:30 a.m. when I'm running around my apartment when I lived with Zach, looking everywhere for my bag of weed that I took with me to the bar, but I lost it while I was out sometime. And I'm frantic. I woke him and his wife up, and I'm fucking running around the apartment loopy-looed, looking for my bag of weed that he knows that he watched me put it in my bag to take with me when I left in the morning. So he's like, "You don't
Mhm.
have it here, man." Fuck! And I'm screaming at him, and it's like, okay, you know what?
I
I'm
even
just gonna
remember that too.
so I end up, so it's like there's a big block between like 6 p.m. and 3:30 or 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning. I don't know where the fuck I went, what I was doing, but somehow I made it into, I got obviously must have taken some buses or something, but I got back to
Or
Richmond,
something.
whatever. But
Hmm.
like, that's a really big block of time to have no idea where I was or what I was doing, especially at the time you know, it was like one of those situations where if someone were to offer me drugs or something, I wouldn't even ask what it was. I'd just take it. I would
Yeah.
say, don't tell me. Don't you tell me what it is. I just want to see if whatever, right? Like sometimes people would ask me if what I'm on. I don't know, whatever I got from people. Like it didn't matter to me at all, right? So to know that and then to know there's blocks of time I can't 6 to 3, that's like a long time to not
Yeah.
know where I was. And then not even that, but it's like so many things could have been going on in that period of time. And who knows, like what could have ended up being the case, especially like usually in situations where I don't remember much, my walking ain't so great. You know what I mean?
No.
So like I could have fallen in front of a car for whatever, right? But so
Yeah.
like I said, I explained to people whenever I talk to them about these kind of things, is like I got so lucky, in my opinion, really. I got so fucking lucky because so many times I think back to things in my mind where I could easily not be walking around today, and simply because I let myself get so wrapped up in the need to drink and do all that sort of stuff, and so like I said, it was not until the day after that uh, I hated myself, and I told myself, that's it. I'm not even, so at the time I was saying, I'm not even going to let my fucking asshole brother talk me into going out and drinking again because I
Yeah.
feel like dirt. Even
Hmm.
Thomas rode out to the apartment that day, and he wanted me to come out and do whatever with him. But I just, no, you can come here and I'll come outside and I'll smoke a cigarette with you or whatever, but I ain't going anywhere. Like I can barely move. Like I fucking drank a lot of
Fuck.
beers that day, and I
Oh
know
yeah.
I drank more when I got home to the apartment, and that kind of thing, which I obviously had no real need to do. I just figured, what the hell, I gotta unwind before I go to bed now, and it's like I spent all day fucking unwinding at the bar. Why do I need to go
Yeah.
home and unwind with more liquor? What
That's
is
the
wrong with
insanity
me,
of it.
man? So, like I said, it's just like there are so many times where simply on the fact that like I could have definitely ended my life in a lot of situations, even just by overconsumption, right? Because I know
Yeah.
people that, like I said, I know people that I used to chat with, and they were age bracket, friend group, all that kind of thing. They choked on their own vomit and died, right? Like, and most of the time when that happens, the person's alone, and that sucks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, then I think back to normally, like, I had a nasty habit of just getting to a point where I would just disappear from any function that I was at, and nobody would know
Yeah.
where I went. And it's like, I wouldn't say I was going anywhere either. I wouldn't tell
Yeah,
anybody.
when
I
you
wouldn't,
disappeared from the landing, you never told any of us. You just all of a sudden were like, "Where the hell's Kris?" And then we couldn't
yeah,
find you anywhere. So we're like, "Okay, I guess he must have left."
yeah. And that I would do that all the time. So it would then I would forget lots of stuff. So the next morning I'd be like, how the fuck like did we get wherever, right? Like I would remember a snippet of being somewhere else, and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about because you disappeared at such and such a time. And it's like, what? With who? Well, nobody. You just disappeared. Like your backpack was gone. Like you were just gone. And it's like, fuck, again? Like it just so hindsight's a real funny thing,
It
like
is.
where evidently I can see the pure chaos that I was living in, and I could see that everyone else could see it because of the fact that like I thought that, especially in situations where I think that I'm with these people, and we're all like looking out for each other or whatever. It's like, no, dude, I was looking out for me, and I probably got some kind of idea in my mind of something that was better for Kris. So I would just fuck these guys and disappear. Not even have the decency to say, hey, thanks for having me at your spot and whatever. I'm gonna head out, so I'll see you guys later or nothing. Never.
Hmm.
No. Like maybe once in a blue moon, but normally it would just be, where the fuck did he go? Because I would just leave. Like
Or I have
people
to
would,
carry you on my shoulder back to your place.
oh yeah, and then to
You remember
wake up
that?
the next day with a letter taped to my door saying I can no longer live here. Like
Yeah, we woke up the person that lived upstairs or whatever, or maybe it was downstairs. I can't
that was
remember.
Pauline. She
Uh,
lived upstairs, and
yeah, because I had to go open the window because it was locked, and I was gonna throw you in the window, but she came down and let us in the front door. So then I
yeah,
carried you in, and then I put you on your bed because you were at we were having a party at our house with me, Dylan, Jason, that house on Genesis Cedar Road there, and then you
yeah,
were starting to be belligerent to people, like mouth people off and stuff, and then so people were coming to me like, "You got to do something about your brother, man. Like he's gonna get beat up if he keeps acting this way." And then you ended up passing out. So I was like, "Fuck!" I was like, "Okay, so I guess I'll just carry you home." So I put you over my shoulder and fucking, 'cause you didn't live too far, right? So I just fucking carried you back home down the street, and then I tried to get in the window, and then the landlady came down, and then she ended up letting me in through the front door. I was like, oh shit, he's probably gonna get a blast from her tomorrow.
Oh, I got a letter on my door. So I woke, that's one of the things. See, and it's like something like that, where it's like, okay, it would have turned out a little differently had I not lost my key or left my keys somewhere at your place and
Mhm.
whatever. But I
There's
mean,
nothing in your pockets or nothing, so I
yeah.
can.
So then it's kind of
I
like,
was drunk too, so.
well, exactly. And so I wake up in the morning to a letter on my door, and it's like, okay, like, you're out of control, dude, and you can no longer live in my house. I don't feel safe with you living in here. You know what I mean? Because there would even be situations where I'd be out and she would call me and say, like, you've got to close your window because it's cold in the house or whatever. And because it was an illegal suite, so whatever. And I
Yeah.
would tell her, like, you don't fucking go in there and you don't fucking touch my window. Like, if you go in there, I will fucking come into your door that I can open whenever I want, and I'll come and do whatever I want in your fucking house and see how you like it. And that was the mentality I had with people.
Yeah.
So of course, having that be the case, and then, her getting woken up at fucking what, 2 in the morning or whatever it was, only because I had to get back in the house and you were the one that was trying to get me there, right? So you're just trying to help me, and she's probably getting all pissy with you because of
She was
my
actually not that mean. She was kind of upset that she got woken up, and she was like worried that somebody was trying to break in. But she was actually pretty like decent, from what I remember. And I was like, "Oh, sorry, like I apologize. He passed out. I was just carrying him home." And she was like, "Oh, like kind of concerned."
Yeah.
But she
But
let us in, and I put you in. But yeah, no, it's fucking out of control, buddy. And it
well,
doesn't seem like everything you were telling me, and this is kind of what happened to me too. It's like it never is just one thing that gets you to get sober. It's like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's like all this shit builds up, which is what it sounds like to you. And then after that landing moment, and then you're just like, okay, no, that's the final fucking straw. I gotta just not do that. So like, how was like your transition from drinking to getting sober? Like, what kind of shit were you going through then?
well, see it for me, it was like the general feeling of life at the time was just pure confusion, right? Like, it's kind of like one of those weird things of knowing that I've got to stop something, but not believing that at the same time. But then,
Mm-hmm.
like, realizing, the slew of problems that I was having, right? At the time I was having the problems, and and whatever. I didn't realize to myself at the time that, well, I'm actually the root of all of these things, right? So if I change things about myself, I wasn't really even willing to think about that at the time either, because again, I was so fogged and so whichever. So it was kind of like absolute confusion, like, well, why am I going to do something I don't really believe in, sort of thing? And like, why do I have to, is the thing too. And
Yeah, that's
then I wouldn't even answer that question for myself because, I would always try to tell myself, well, you don't. You don't have to do anything, right? But
mm.
it was kind of like, okay, well, it confused the ever living bejesus out of me. And then I really started to wonder, like, why am I so confused about it? Right? Like, why am I so like on the fence about this? Like one minute I could be, reassuring myself that it's the best thing for me, but then the next minute I'm completely opposite to that. And it's like, no, no, this is just how I am, right? Like, it's just how it's going to be. But then, it took kind of getting over the things that I would try to convince myself that it's fine, right? Like, that was the problem that I was having at the beginning. So then that's why it took for me getting around more people and hearing what the other people that are getting sober had to say. And it's like, okay, well, these are some people that have stories that they're telling that I actually like, that could be a story of my own. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of resonate with these people,
Yeah.
and that it was the intrigue of, the things that these people have gone through, and then being around people that have been sober for like 25 plus years or whatever, even, and hearing some of the stuff that they've had to say, you know, and then it was like, okay, well, I think this might be something that I could get down on, and then it was kind of like, you know, like the want, right? So it was kind of like, well, now I want to do this because it seems almost like a challenge, right? So I almost it was like one of those weird situations where like seeing what other people had to say and then realizing that me and these other people aren't so different, it really actually caused me to like, okay, well, what about what they're saying is making sense to me, and why is that, right? Like what do I relate to in what they're saying? So that actually caused me to have to introspect a whole lot in a very honest way, because once I realized like I've got to look at myself about it, then I started thinking in terms of like, well, if I'm going to ask myself questions, I'm not going to lie to myself. So like I've got to make sure that whatever I tell myself or come up with as far as the introspection aspect of it, like I've got to be honest with myself, because even if I lie to myself, I'll fucking know it, and then it's not going to work for me. Or what would be the point of lying to myself when I know every secret that I have, right? Like, so it kind of took getting myself into the mindset of like trying to make myself see things in a realistic way instead of a twisted I'm better than you kind of way, which is what I did a lot, like, well, you can have problems, I won't have any problems, right? Like that was the mindset. And it was getting over the mindset of that really started to have things grow, which kind of became a problem for me at the beginning, because then I had expectations of myself, right? And it was the expectations I had of myself that at the beginning, I probably put them a little bit too high, right? Like I
Yeah.
expected everything to be a complete 180 as soon as I make that decision to stop. No,
Yeah.
that's not how it works. Like,
Nope.
and then at first thinking like, oh, I'm just going to stop drinking and everything's going to be better right away. Now, then I realized that I made my life into an absolute fucking mess while I was all drunk and stuff. And it's like, it wasn't till I stopped that it's like, okay, well, what do normal people do? And then it's like, oh, they do all this other stuff. They get vehicles and they try to, have a career, and they try to do all this stuff. And, you know, it's like when I stopped drinking, I realized that all I did was find ways to get money out of the banks and then never, like, take loans and never pay them, use credit
Yeah.
cards and just get all the money I can to drink. So then I left my life in fucking shambles, because then it's like, oh, well, all they'll try to do is fucking mail me a bill. I'll just move. I'll get kicked out of a place again, and then they'll never be able to find me. So who cares if I owe them money, right? So it wasn't
Yeah.
until, I wanted to start building a life for myself that I realized how badly I fucked myself up, even in just a financial standpoint, right? And it was like, there were periods of time where, yeah, I was working lots and trying to do that and make lots of money, but the, like, I wasn't using it effectively. So I was always broke, and people would be like, well, why are you always broke? You make more money than I do. And it's like, well, I guess I got a drinking problem. So like
Mhm.
the first thing I started to notice that was a real big motivator for me, once I stopped spending all of my money on booze and everything, like once I got, a few paychecks under the belt or whatever, I'm like, well, hey, this is weird. I actually have a little bit of money. Like, because then I would never, I realized that, like, when I was drinking and stuff, I never wanted anything because it would eat into my drinking money. Like I didn't want to
Yeah.
buy myself stuff. I didn't want to have anything, because not only would it eat into my drinking money, but I'd probably destroy it anyway. Right. So I
Yeah.
didn't really like even know what it was that I wanted for, like, even if it was just stuff, right? Like I didn't I wouldn't be able to go into a store and say, "Hey, I want that." Like, I mean, I could, but it wouldn't be like something in my mind where like that would be cool to have because, right? There was no ever because. It's like I want it. And that was like how I was, right? So I didn't really know even what some of the things were that I liked. So, transitioning from being a only like centered around drinking lifestyle, it's like then I had to start figuring out what it is that I actually like to do, because it's like I have now taken drinking off the table for myself, right? I realized I really didn't have any hobbies, or I didn't have really anything that was an interest of mine, right? Like it was all, what can I do? Like I'll like something if I can drink while I'm doing it. You know what I mean? Like that was how I assessed whether or not I liked something, so, or, like, oh, that would be cool. It would be even cooler when I'm drunk. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. So I never
Yeah.
really liked, especially starting at like 16 or 14 or something, whatever, 2000, grade 9. I fucking don't even really, my
Yeah.
chronological order is still messed up to this day, but at that age, it's like, that's usually when people are supposed to start like figuring out what kind of things they like and what kind of interests they have and all that sort
Hmm.
of thing. I never did any of that. Like, it was just, okay, well, if I can't do that thing while I'm having some drinks, then I don't want to do it, like there's
Exactly.
not
Yeah.
time. Or like if like even going to I like movies, right? But I wouldn't really want to go to a movie because I can't sit there that long without having a drink, right? And then I end up kicked out of the movie theater because I try to sneak the
Yeah.
booze in there and think no one notices, but these kids' parents right here are listening to the things coming out of my mouth while I'm making fun of the movie or laughing at the movie and saying fucked up shit. Then they can smell the
Yeah.
alcohol, and of course, that's when I get kicked out, you know?
Hmm.
And then, of course, they try to remove me from there, and a scene happens, right? So it's like, I see all these things where it's like, fuck. Then I never even, eventually it's like, I wouldn't even entertain the idea of agreeing to go into a movie theater because of that reason, right? So it's kind of like,
Well, let me ask you something, Kris. Do you make many scenes like that anymore since you stopped drinking? Because I know I don't. Because I used to do shit like that too.
absolutely not. Absolutely
Yeah.
not. I mean,
Hmm.
simply
Strange.
simply because of my own personal mental proclivities. I've got some mental disorders and things like that I struggle with quite heavily. Sometimes those things in situations that cause me high levels of stress, I can become quite aggressive, uh
Hmm.
or like kind of rude, very rude. But the thing is, I understand why this happens, and it's really unfortunate that like I can be self-aware without the control of it. So I understand it, right? But it's kind of one of those things where it's like I remember being drunk and having so that being said, that's why I find that for each person it will be slightly different what works, because a lot of the
Yeah.
time when I was drunk, I thought my only problem was the alcohol, right? So I thought, oh, well, I get really, really, really mad all the time, but that's because I drink. And that's what I told myself, right? So
Hmm.
it wasn't until, I'd gotten over a lot of the drinking related problems until I started to realize, like, okay, well, there's things are much better, but there's still something amiss, right? So that's
Yeah.
when I started to really try to pick apart, what would be in my best interest to do and that kind of thing. So like I've got issues that I wouldn't have known about, period, nor ever would have taken the time of day to try to correct had I kept drinking, because
Hmm.
at the time it's like, it's just a drinking thing, it's not a big deal, right? Like
Yeah.
the only thing wrong with me is my drinking problem, is what I would tell myself. And to me, then when I would say that to someone, I'd say, and I also don't believe that that's a problem, it's fun, like that kind of thing, right? So then when I realized what, you know how I am, like what my mind really boils down to, a lot of the things that affect me nowadays, a lot of them are made exponentially worse by alcohol. So
Yeah.
not only did I have a very bad drinking problem, but I had mental issues that were amplified by my lifestyle and my choices to drink so heavily, you know? So my drinking itself was a problem that was snowballing other problems in my life, right? Which in turn made everything much worse. But then because of the mindset that I was in, it was like, whatever. They'll have to find me to address any of this with me, and they ain't going to do that because I'm not going to allow it, and whatever. Like I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. So that's why it's kind of one of those situations where, like, transitioning from not drinking to, from drinking to not drinking, and then have, like, the hardest part for me was having to sort of face myself, right? Like to sort of not only face myself, but like figure myself out. Cause it was like, well, no, I wouldn't have, you know, had any idea that, there was something of a bigger issue. And, at this current moment in time, it's like, because of the fact that I thought alcohol was a Band-Aid, I was like, if I do have an issue, it's probably just fixing it for me anyway, right? Which, no, not the case, right?
No.
It actually was making a lot of the way my brain works is a little different than lots of people I'd imagine. There's a lot of people that obviously be the same, but it's like, even understanding one piece and how alcohol affects that, like, that's, to this day, that's kind of one of the things that keeps me from drinking. So and that's not to say that, so like, it's like one of those things. I've stumbled a number of times, right? So October 5th, 2013 was the day I decided it was in my best interest to not do it. And I did, like, I don't like to use the word fail, but I've stumbled a number of times since then,
Yeah.
and
It happens.
and it's kind of like, even at this current moment in time, the amount of time between, the 2013 and now is not how long I've been sober, like,
Yeah.
and it's all, for me, it took realizing some healthier ways to manage stressors, right? And,
Yeah.
up until about a year, or last November or so, I thought I had, enough experience managing my stressors. And then I ended up experiencing a stressor in my life that was way worse than all the other ones.
Yeah.
I wasn't armed for that, So,
Yeah.
of course, I ended up fucking drinking a few times, right? Alone. In a fucking dark garage in the middle of winter with no heat. Like, it was just, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, that's why I always say, like, knowing yourself is so important. And that's the struggle about the beginning of sobriety, is like, if anyone would be like me, I didn't know myself at all, right? And that's why I find the beginning so important for everybody, because it's like, that's the part where you really have to start to learn who you are if you don't know, or even if you do and you've got hobbies and interests, make those, like, the things that you want to focus on. Because a lot of the times, like, even if I hadn't had one of the hobbies that I had, like, I love photography, right? If I didn't have that when I first started, I probably wouldn't have really, because it's about, for me, it was about having a purpose of sorts, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
not necessarily like a life purpose per se, but like having something to do purposefully that's not damaging, right? So for me, I found the one thing being, like, photography at the time, and saying, like, I've got to make this healthy thing something that I do when I get upset, or when I
Yeah.
get whichever, like, anything. It took realizing what the main things that affected me were, that caused me to want to drink, right? And understanding that. And even that
Yeah.
was a struggle for me, because it's like, there's obvious things that would push someone like that. Like, you and I are related, or we're brothers. We had the same grandma. And when she died, fuck, that one sent me right off the wall. Like
Hmm.
I went on about a week bender after that,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Right. So it's just knowing certain things that are a definite stressor type thing, and then realizing or having to train my own brain to not get into that, well, now I need a drink, because like I said, it's so socially acceptable and that's the most common. Like I even work with people at the moment where that's their, like, even an hour into their workday, they're saying, I
Yeah.
need a drink, and it's
Yeah.
like,
That's a staple
okay.
for
So
lots of people.
yeah, and that's kind of like one of the things that I really had to learn and embrace is that, you know, life is about the duality, right? Like you can't have happiness without sadness, right? And
Yeah.
all of these things will affect people differently, but I had to train my brain to not revert to, well, I need a drink over it,
Hmm.
because that was the hardest for me. That was the hardest thing to get around is like how can I go get through a situation that I struggle with without saying like I need a drink about it, right? Like
So
that
what
was,
have you come to the solution for that? Like, what do you think the best way to handle that is?
well, part of, see, as long as you can recognize it, for me, recognizing it
Hmm.
is the most important part. And then
So being able to build that kind of foresight or insight to yourself to recognize when you're being triggered, or like when something comes on, you know what you're going to fall back onto, which is, I want to drink some booze. And you just, as long as you recognize this and you think it through and you're like, okay, I know where this leads, right? So you just kind of have that process in your mind in real time when that happens, right?
yeah, and then
Hmm.
I basically create myself a list of things to do, like when
Hmm.
I get upset, for example, and I start to feel my borderline rage coming on,
Yeah.
I have to as soon as I recognize these things, I grab onto one of my healthy coping mechanisms. Like, for example, I'll at at any point in time when I have the ability, I'll stop and I'll take my camera and go mess with a little bit and just play. Or even if I'm out and about and I don't have my camera, well, I've got a smartphone, dude, and it's got a
Yeah.
camera on it. So as soon as I start to realize these things in my own mind, that's, even to this day, my mind will start to shift back into that, oh fuck, I need a drink kind of thing. And
Hmm.
I'm fucking this far along in my journey, right? And it's like I still struggle with that aspect. But
Yeah.
it's for me, it's having a list of things that you can do to sort of cope with these things. And then once I kind of, so, because for me, once I realize that I'm getting to a point where I need to change my shift my mindset away from that, that's when I've got like a list of certain things that I may do, in that thing, whether it be even simply just drop down and do push-ups, right? Like
Yeah.
I've been getting real hard
Change the
in the
state.
push-up and stuff like that, or changing the state's a big one. And a lot of times for me, anger pushes me to the mindset of I want to drink. That's my Anger is my biggest struggle.
Biggest trigger.
So
Hmm.
whenever possible, my biggest form of, so I'll try to change my body chemistry, right? So as soon as I start getting like angry, like I physically get there, I I cold water my face good, right? And like a lot of times the cold water hitting my face will change my body chemistry enough in my brain to have me calm down enough to have that little bit of rationale to say, okay, you need to cope healthy right now, right? Like you need to
Yeah.
just settle down, and it's like, again, there's all kinds of ways that, like, sometimes some things will work properly and sometimes they won't, right? So that's why I have to personally, I keep working on my list of things because, sometimes some things may not be proper for a situation. Like, say I'm in the middle of a bank and I get pissed off. I'm not going to sit there and splash water all over my face and make a huge mess in the bank. That just isn't
Yeah.
adequate for that time. So it's like,
Yeah.
for me, it took being
You need the
able
tool for
to,
the job.
yeah, that's right. So you got to kind of build your own toolbox of different things that could apply to different situations you may be in, or even the environment you're in, right? Like not
And you
everything's
just
gonna,
tested this stuff to kind of find out what worked for you?
yeah, yeah, because it's basically, you know, at the very beginning when I was trying to find different ways to sort of do these things, I really had no idea where to start, like,
Hmm.
and then
Yeah.
it took also realizing that I've got my own other mental disorders and shit like that that I've got to
Hmm.
deal with. So then I went and did, between CBT and DBT, things like that. Those couple of
Yeah.
things sort of helped me learn a few proper coping mechanisms that work very good or very well. and
Okay.
and it's not even like even for some of the things that aren't related to the thing they're trying to help me with in those programs, I find a lot of the stuff very applicable to sobriety itself, simply because a lot of the stuff that will trigger me to want to drink will also have a high likelihood of triggering an emotion that causes
Hmm.
me disruption in my life, right? And so
Yeah.
my biggest tool was the understanding aspect, like trying to, because sometimes I can, it'll get away from me, and then before I know it, I'm yelling and screaming at somebody who doesn't deserve it, right? And
Yeah.
I realize, and then I always try to make a point to apologize to people as soon as, if that does happen. But even
Yeah.
like the last few months, even, I've been working a lot on like mindfulness and mindset and that kind of thing, right? So a lot of things that are like in the certain CBT and DBT programs and everything, they're all about like helping with that kind of thing and coping with like the mental aspect. Because for me, it's like I can be my own worst enemy on the topic, but if I remember to stay mindful about why it's in my best interest to remain on my path, that's really the most powerful thing for me. Is because, I used to never ever notice when I'm fucking a little bit, you know, or like sometimes I would be overly aggressive with somebody and I wouldn't understand that I was being aggressive. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
or even just abrasive in a sense. Like, it's like sometimes being blunt is like not appropriate for a time. And like just understanding enough about myself and realizing, okay, this is some of the ways that I interpret things, but then also trying to tap into other people's perception. That was a big thing for me, is because certain things, even I know in my own mind, I wouldn't be offended if someone said to me, but not everyone's the same. And that's, again, what I really have found is like I've learned a lot of useful stuff because I, again, have tried a number of different groups, things like that. They were all alcohol, or like AA groups, or I forget the name of a couple of the other ones anyway, but
Yeah.
they were all, like pretty, pretty like cookie cutter, you know what I mean? So they teach you some stuff
Hmm.
and then say, this is the shit that works, right? And at the very beginning, in my, like with my level of knowledge, that's at the time, all I knew was whatever, that's what there is, right? I
Yeah.
didn't know there was any other options for anything, or, you know, even at the beginning, people were like, okay, well, you've got to do what's here and don't try to do anything for yourself. I was told in a couple of them, like, you've got to do
Really.
this stuff and then get a sponsor and then run everything you do by this person because they know better than you. Right. And that kind of structure didn't really work for me. So, I know people that it would work for. So I would, like I said, I would always, like, for myself, I would always say, like, the beginning, when you don't know something, that's when you should try to diversify and try to figure other things out and get the different perspectives from these places on the topic, because without a proper foundation, at least, you still won't know what's going to work for you. And right away, even there was the one How It Works group out of Ladner. They've got a bunch of
Yeah.
different places you can go for that one, but that's the one that worked the best for me because they were more of like a little bit more open-minded and everything, and a little more encompassing than just alcohol. And it was kind of like bare bones. It was the same as like an AA group kind of thing, but it was just, for me, that one was slightly different, right? And you know it was one of those things where that definitely, I learned a lot of very valuable stuff from it. And I would, like I said, I would preach that one to a lot of people, especially people that are kind of more like me. But doing that alone for me was not necessarily the best way to go about it, because sure, you could get through the step program and everything, but you know especially if you don't understand something, they would basically just tell you to put in the work. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't clear up what I'm not understanding. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so it kind of took for me, like, having that foundation and being around the people that know this stuff. And then especially within those groups, there's people that are more of like the maximalist diehard group type people, and then there's the ones that go because it helps them, but they're not maximalist group type people, right? So you meet a whole bunch of different people who then have other things that they personally use that work for them. So, and being around the like-minded people and talking with them, that's what helped me learn, right? And
Yeah.
that's why I say there's so much benefit to going to a group like that, or whichever, where there's more people that you'll be able to, like, even having a simple conversation with somebody. It's like they'll say, "Oh, I did these things and blah 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 blah." It's like, I'd be like, well, why did you do this thing, right? Like, what was the point of this? And then they explain
Mhm.
why that's what one thing that they do to help themselves, because that works for them,
Yeah.
right? And then it's like, oh, that sounds interesting. So then it gave me more ability and actually more willingness to try to find other ways to, like, because then for me, what it really was about was like, okay, this is working to an extent, but I had to really ask myself, what about it should what about it do I think could be different for me, or what could work better for me? Like, because then I also found that I was trying so hard to get away from that selfish mentality that I started, like, trying to, like, basically make myself into these people, right? Which again, not going to work for me. So then I had to be honest with myself and say, like if I were to be writing like a comment form to let them know how they're doing, kind of thing, like you do see somewhere, what would I say would be, like, as far as, say there was like 10 clones of me looking for a group, what would I want to change for the Chris's, right? And
Yeah.
like that kind of thing, right? So it really, really requires a deep dive, but to be able to do that, I found I wouldn't have been, very good at it had I not had that beginning foundation of the group, right? So, but like I even said before, that it was like, even at the very, very beginning, when I started hermiting and not talking to a soul and even turning off my phone so no one could talk to me unless I let them, it was like, you know, finding other like-minded people that wanted to do it also. It was like, okay, well, that's because a lot of stuff while I was in that problem, I felt alone all the time. Like,
Yeah.
I always just felt like an outcast, like I was never ever a part of anything, even though I was there, I just wasn't a part of it, right? And there could be people all over. I still feel like I'm alone in my own little world, my own little situation, right?
Mhm.
And it's like having a place that it's populated with people that want the best for themselves as well, and not only themselves but everyone else that walks through those doors. Like, for me, that was like a really big thing, is like, why the fuck would these people want to accept me in here? Like,
Mhm.
and that's where my mentality was at the time, is like I was really down on myself, right?
Yeah.
And personally attacking my own oneself, where then I walked through these doors, and the more I would go in there and the more people would be sort of excited to see me, the wonder behind why do they even give a fuck if I'm coming? Like, that mentality started to fade away, because I also thought at the beginning that that mentality I had that was so negative towards myself, was actually stopping me from participating properly, right? Or if
Mm-hmm.
like, then I found myself in a situation where then I would try to, like, if there wasn't somebody that I knew well enough going, I'm just not going to go, you know? And so that's when I started to notice, like, certain things that I, even going to those groups, the certain things that I would do, like, I would do what they lay out for you as the tools that they provide. But it really caused me to outside of those instances, try to find the things that I could, adopt into my own, because it's a lifestyle, you know, it's
Yeah.
not just one choice you make one time. And that's where I was losing myself, is like, okay, well, I've
Mm-hmm.
made the choice, but what the fuck? No, it's a lifestyle, and once I kind of realized that, is like, okay, so it kind of got me to focus on, you know, participating in the group when I'm there,
Mm-hmm.
taking what I learned from there out of there, but then while I'm not there, not falling into the same mindset. And that was important for me, right? Is like getting the mind. See, a lot of it for me boils down to, like, the mindset of it, right? So, I catch myself every single day almost that for some reason or another thinking like, I could use a drink right now. Like, at my work
A
today,
little drinky poo.
the computers were all messed up, right? So it made our day a
Uh-huh.
little bit harder in there and that kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh man, this morning one person came in and ordered a Bailey's and coffee, dude. And I'm like, oh,
I
because
could go for one.
yeah. And and that's where my mind was going, is like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I could use one of them right there. Or even like, saying to someone like, oh man, like, one of the people at work would be like, I could use a drink. And it's like, me too, trust me, and like that kind of thing. But then it's like,
Yeah.
no, at this current moment in time, that's for me, that's like, okay, well, I can acknowledge that that's something that, yeah, I do need a drink, right? Like, yeah, I can acknowledge it, but I know
Yeah.
full well I'm not going to, and that
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? So, but how out of nowhere those things can come, now that I'm able to actually, like, recognize and acknowledge these things. That would be an instance that fucking years ago, that would have easily caught me to have a drink again. No doubt, no problem. You know, and it wasn't until, like the biggest stressor of my current life was my marriage falling apart, right? And that was
Mm-hmm.
really, really hard for
Oh
me to
yeah.
deal with. So I did, of course, end up fucking being, like, way, way devastated about it, not having my own understanding of it. I to this day, I struggle with that, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, that was one of the bigger stressors of my life. And I thought, at the very beginning when it was unfolded, I thought that, yeah, I got this on lock. It'll be fine, right? Like, I'm not going to do anything stupid. Well, of course, I ended up, yeah, I fucking drank, right? Not a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, then you
It
go
didn't make
long
anything
enough.
better, did it?
No. And that's what
Yeah.
happened was, after going long enough too, like, at this current moment in time, like, my body totally does not agree with alcohol at all. Like,
Yeah.
all that situation did for me was make me feel sick and then extremely tired, right? And those drinking, that's a dangerous combo. Like, I
Yep.
could have easily passed out and choked on my vomit, right? But again,
Yes.
and it's like, you know, especially any amount of time before, I would have actually, to this day, even been beating myself up about doing that, right? But, you know, I've already done it and I can't change it. I wish I didn't do it, and that's always going to be, but it's, for me, it's like the understanding that, you know, like, some things are just really tough, but and you may stumble like that, but I also don't like to use the word fail, because I don't believe that I failed. right? I don't believe that that's the case. I just, it's kind of one of those situations where, yeah, it really sucks to actually have, because having to face the fact that I did it,
Yeah.
that was huge for me, right? Like,
Mhm.
I didn't second guess any of it after the fact. I faced it head on, like, yeah. Yeah, so it was kind of one of those things where, like as soon as I opened my eyes the following day, I was devastated with myself, right? I just felt like the word fail was tattooed on my forehead. You know what I mean? But it was like,
Mhm. Yeah.
again, I had to acknowledge that no, you didn't fail, you stumbled, right? Like, because I hate the word fail. It just sounds such a negative connotation to it, because it's one of those things where
You're either winning or you're learning. You're either winning or
exactly.
you're
And
learning.
the way I see it personally is you do not fail until you fully give up, right? So it
Yeah.
was acknowledging that I did it. It's like, there you go. And then what I chose to take away from that situation was a learning experience as to why, because why is always going to
Mhm.
be at the forefront for me. It's like, I have to know why. And even if I don't fully understand why, I've got to ask myself and try to give me an honest answer, because I'm it's one
Mhm.
of those things where I'm still continuing and I'm still moving forward, but people stumble, not
Yeah.
everybody gets that, an insane amount of time and whatever, right? Like, life happens, and even in my own opinion, it's kind of one of those things where I think that maybe I thought to myself that no matter what, like, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, I like to think that, I can whatever happens, I can get through it healthy. But again, I just sort of proved to myself at that point that didn't quite pan out for me. But it's my choice to not give up entirely that changes it from being a
Mhm.
failure to just a learning experience, because now I fully
Yeah.
know, like, that particular situation that unfolded for me affected me greatly, right? So now I know that that's one of my top extremes for things that could mess with me. It caused me to go and do this one thing that I'm now not happy about in the least, but I've learned some lessons over it, right? And, like, it's kind of one of those things where in hindsight, I could have put myself into a different position to avoid that had I been a little more mindful beforehand. But that's not always going to be the case. Like, nobody has x-ray vision, or they can't see the future, but
No. Yeah.
hindsight's right, unchangeable. The past is unchangeable, you know? So when I look at things in hindsight, I always take a lot more than I would have ever used to, because I actually, to this day, give myself the benefit of being honest about these things and facing them head on, because, especially when I was in the problem, I was a serial avoider, like, I would
Mhm.
avoid any situation that makes me uncomfortable or mad, or kind of is sort of directed at myself. And no, 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 none of that. But actually taking that, like, it's one of those weird feelings that I have about it, that I absolutely despise that I've done it, but at the same time, I'm very happy that I did, because I've actually learned some new shit for myself, right? Which, again, it's that double-edged sword, It's like taking a negative and taking everything positive out of that negative is the important part, right? Like, instead of just
Yeah.
furthering the issue and going more and more down a hole there, stopping yourself and really saying, like, no, no, we've got a plan, Kris, and taking it and kind of, like, realizing that, for one, you can't change the past, and what's done is done. Getting over that little hump for me was a little bit of a struggle too, because, oh man, was I angry with myself, and that kind of thing,
I bet. Yeah.
because it was like, honestly, it, understanding how I got there is still right now. I still don't quite understand it. Like I wasn't there, and then I had
Hmm.
some beers, right? Like I don't really, the process that got me there, I still am trying to figure out myself, right? But that causes me to really take it and use it as motivation. You know what I mean? Because I learned a lot of really good why not reasons, like why I know I should not, and why that's not a good idea, and why that's more harmful than good. And like a lot of these contributing factors to the action itself is, for me, extremely valuable. You know what I mean? And then I can also, you know, move forward to this day with a sense of pride, knowing that, yeah, I messed up like people do. We're all human. But I did not
Hmm.
let it
Yeah.
get the better of me, right? Because that's what will happen is someone will kind of stumble in that respect, and you know that kind of thing, and they'll beat themselves to shit over it, and which requires
Yep.
more stressors and uh, m- more gravity pulling you towards that thing that you shouldn't be doing, right? It's like, it gets you back into that alcohol is a universal band-aid mindset where, you know, for a good solid day, that's what did it for me, was like thinking that I need a fucking band-aid for what's going on in my life right now, when that was farthest from what I should have done. But like I said, people mess up and you can't change the past. And I've seen so many people make that same mistake and they never turn it back around. And so
Hmm.
using that experience that I've gained from other people and seeing how other people have approached it, because I've seen it where that'll happen to someone and either they never, like I've seen that happen to someone and they're dead now. I've seen that happen to someone and they were doing it again for months before they turned it back around.
Yep.
But then I've also
Hmm.
seen people that will do it and then they just learn themselves a lesson, you know? So there's no, even when it comes
Yep.
to doing it again, it's what I would always tell people is don't be hard on yourself, like it happens, even though the one thing I don't want to happen is that, and it did, I'm not going to, sit here and beat myself up and say like, well, you're weak now and you're whatever, right? Like, no, no, and it's like, I can definitely see how my mindset would, like, because it's weird to think, but I can tap into my mindset as if I was still a problem drinker. You know what I mean? Like, it's a
Hmm.
weird thing to be able to do in my own head, is like, what if I was drunk right now? What would be, whatever, right? Like, what would be my next course of action? And when I focus on things like that and really try to tell myself a story, something that basically takes me back to a time when it was an issue, to my current time, that for me there's a lot of value in that span right there, where I can look back on the time and think, in that level or that period of time, what was the things that were going good that helped me, and what were the things that caused me these negative emotions, and then I can then focus on,
Yeah.
say, the things that I remember that helped me through that span of time at my hardest points, and kind of moving forward focus more on that type of stuff, right? Like focus more on the things that uh keep me motivated and keep me productive and like keep me busy and in a healthy way, right? Like, it's kind of like one of those things where
Hmm.
sometimes you can't have a positive without a negative, right? Like there's, you can't have up without down, like sometimes, if, like, I wouldn't say everyone should try it, right? That's a terrible idea. But because
Yeah.
I
But they
ended
can
up,
learn from people who've done it like you and listen to your advice, right?
that's exactly right. And so it's like, for me,
That's wisdom.
though I hate that I did it, right? I
Mhm.
definitely think that, it's one of those things where if someone were to hear like, oh, well, this guy's, been, had years and then went out and did it again and now has got no years, right? Like, to me, that's sort of like one of those situations that I know there have been periods of time where somebody shared that with me that happened to them. And um, at a time when I was contemplating, and I was in a bad way, contemplating just saying, fuck it, right? And for someone to share with me that, yeah, I went out and did this, but I'm still here today. Like, I'm still because at the time when the story was shared with me, it was just after an Alcoholics Anonymous group. And so this person was sort of sharing this thing with me is like, I don't, like I find so much value in that because for me, at one point in my past, someone else doing the negative thing has helped me in a positive way, where then I ended up going forth and helping that person by just listening to them even, right? So it's like for it to have happened, I actually find benefit in the ability to now be able to share that story with people and say, look,
Yeah.
it can happen to people, right? Like what I always stress to everyone I speak to about these kind of things is like, hey, like at least if you can take something away from my experience and take something positive, or maybe you remember it when you're in a tough spot and you remember something about this that will help you get through the next thing or the next stressor or whatever. Like for me, that's the real benefit because I know how much it's helped me in the
Yeah.
past with someone simply sharing these kind of things, right? Like I don't think that you know, I would have had even the same mindset about myself if I did that without having heard it from a number of different people in the past. You know what I mean? So that's another thing that played into my thoughts on not beating myself up about it. Not really, like I said, it's inherently negative, right? But not treating
Hmm.
it as a negative for me has been the most beneficial thing because now I've taken it and I've shared it with other people who, whatever, they may have taken something away, they may not have, but um, you know, it's fostered a lot of really good conversations and everything, right? So
Yeah.
it's not about dwelling on the fact that yeah, it sucks and I wouldn't ever want to do it again or anything, but because I have is what I tell myself. Because I have, how can I fucking use it to help, or how can I use it to motivate, or how can I use it to impact my own mindset moving forward, right? Like it's one of those interesting things where like trying to getting into the mindset of trying to not focus on negative things and positive things can be really, really hard. But acknowledging the positive or the negative thing and trying to spin it into a positive and use it for good, that's
Hmm.
kind of the thing that really makes it worthwhile for me. And like I said, one of my biggest things that I found even in the last few months that really helps me more than anything else is like trying to find something good to do for somebody, right? So sometimes when I'm feeling real bad, like I'll try to find someone who needs something that I can offer them, right? Or even one thing I noticed really heavily too is like uh, approaching situations. Because I remember in the problem, I used to always try to get everything I can out of everything, right? And approaching situations with
Hmm.
what can I offer to this situation? And it doesn't have to be like giving somebody something or whatever. It's just what experience can you offer to a situation to help in some way? And for me, that's huge. So, like I said, again, I'm still upset that I did do it, of course, because
Uh-huh.
it's just the nature of it. But it's what's really, really beneficial to me is now thinking in terms of taking that situation and using it as an experience to help other people, right? Like that's what really does it for me. So it's gratefulness, being grateful for things, has been something like I never used to be grateful for shit. I wasn't even grateful for my own life. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
really taking the time to like be grateful for things has really impacted me very much. And then being able to further that and take a shitty situation that I don't like at all, but still being grateful for it, that for me is like one of those things that I like to have happen sometimes, because then it's like, now I know there's situations when they get tough for me. It's like, well, you know, I it helps me recognize things a little more preemptively and that kind of thing. So, like I said, there's a lot of aspects of it that I am grateful for, even though I wouldn't suggest it to a soul who doesn't want to,
Hmm.
wants to be away from that, right? But it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know, just the power of being even grateful and then approaching it like, what can I offer to situations? Well, now I have, one thing where even if somebody stumbles and does that for themselves and then ends up encountering me and they're like having that battle with themselves, right? That's for me. Now I feel as though I've put another thing into my toolbox to be armed to the teeth, going into a situation and say like, look, you know, I understand where you're coming from, and here's what I can offer to the situation, and blah blah blah, right? So
Hmm.
it's like, you know, that's kind of the cool part about these these life experiences, is like it's all a matter of perception, really. And sometimes, even if something I say might not help somebody, but I know someone else who's done the same thing and they have a different, you know, explains things from a different perspective, that's also important too, right? So, it's like
100%.
I definitely think because it has happened to me a few times even. It wasn't just one time, right? And it's like over the last fucking number of years, sort of thing, it's happened a few times to me, right? Where, you know, just things get a certain way, and then it's like before I know it, I've made a bad decision. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Well, I think that's really important for people to understand is like we're all human, we're not perfect, but those times are going to happen. You need to be on guard, especially when the shit's hitting the fan in your life, because then you can easily fall back to old um habit patterns and just fall back into using alcohol as like a stress reliever or like to get away from the shit you're dealing with in your life, right? Like, and the thing about alcoholism that I've seen a lot is like it doesn't matter how much time you have. It's like a constant process of just developing yourself and like we were talking about before, getting those different tools for different situations. And like sometimes if you don't have those tools in a certain situation, like if you haven't dealt with a death or if you haven't dealt with a divorce or if you haven't dealt like those big emotional drivers that happen in life, then you're just going to fall and crumble. Because I know I went through some shit too. And it just so happened that I had some tools that I used, and I had to use a few before I found some that actually worked because I was on the brink of relapsing myself. Right. So I think that's very important for people to understand is just like you got to keep giving yourself all these tools so you can put yourself in the best possible situation and position when that shit happens to you, right? And I kind of want to wrap it up with this, but what I want to know before we wrap up
yeah,
is your final thoughts and what would you say to somebody listening in right now who maybe they haven't gotten sober yet, but it's been in the back of their mind, or maybe somebody who's been struggling and gets a little bit of time here and then and falls back into it and just hasn't been able to make it stick. Like, what are your final thoughts? What would you say to them to kind of help them through that?
I would say it would be, if someone's kind of, for the people who are kind of dancing around the idea and thinking about it, what I would challenge them to do is truly, honestly answer to yourself, why are you even thinking about it? Because that's going to be the most
Mm-hmm.
crucial piece of information that you can come across at the beginning, in my opinion. Because for me, I didn't really solidify a why, and I struggled a lot because of that, right? And it wasn't until I found my why like, why am I actually doing this? It caused me to introspect on my life, right? And see
Hmm.
all the things that were, building up in my mind that some of them I wasn't even really aware of until I asked myself
Yeah.
honestly why, right? And then it was also at the beginning, I know full well that I struggled with, well, why do I why can't I, right? And I would fall into these little cycles of my mind trying to trick me into believing that I can do it, right? When I in my heart knew that I can't, right? And that's why I was on the fence for a long time, was because I didn't have my own clear why. And anytime I tried to answer that question to myself, I wasn't honest with me about it even, right? So someone
Hmm.
on the fence, I would seriously challenge them to answer the honest question of why, because that's really going to be your motivating factor, in my opinion. Uh,
Yep.
Simply because of the fact that, like, knowing the why and then trying to move forward with a direction on that basis is definitely of great value. And then, like I said, on anybody that gets a little time here and maybe stumbles or a little bit like that, you know, use use that as your motivation, right? Like, and again, I challenge those people to think, why did I start this in the beginning? Why did I start this in the first place? You know, like like what were the contributing factors to make that even an idea in your mind that you may need this, because of the fact that you're now on a journey, and though you may have some time and then a stumble and then some time and whichever, uh, start at the beginning from in your mind and ask, why did I start doing this, right? And for me, those were the main things that I had to hold in my mind at the very beginning, was the why aspect. Like, and that's
Hmm.
going to be different for every person. But
Absolutely.
I like the thing that I always stress when I tell someone to ask themselves that question, and I stress to be honest with yourself about it, because I know full well that a couple of times that I've stumbled, especially earlier on, um, was simply because I didn't completely answer that question for myself and hold on to it, right? I
Yeah.
because I need to stop. That's not good enough. That's not an answer that, for me, that wasn't an answer that was good enough for me, right? So then I had to
Hmm.
really tell myself, be honest with me, right? Like, Kris, you be honest with yourself. And that's always what I stress, is like, make sure that you
Hmm.
you honestly answer that question to yourself. And even if nobody else hears your answer, you know, make sure that you know it and you carry yourself with that, because that little aspect right there for me has given me the ability to know that know the why, so that when someone tries to encourage me to drink or offers me some or this, that, and the other, then in my mind, it would always flash on that why aspect, right? And in all honesty, too, I blew my own mind when I honestly answered that question for myself at the beginning. It's like, whoa,
Hmm.
okay, like, that's legit. That is a fucking reason. Like, I had that my own aha moment about it, because it was like, okay, I'd asked myself the question about 1,000 times, and I was honestly never honest about it. And when I actually got to the point where it's like I started to demand one thing of myself, and that's sheer honesty about why, that's when I personally started to make progress. So anyone that's even thinking about it, it's on the fence, that's the challenge I say that would really help. It helped me the most, is just be honest with yourself about why you're doing it, and then hold on to that. Like, is it a health reason? Is it your kids? Is it, your family? Is it relationships that you keep destroying? Whatever it may be, anyone who chooses to do it will have an honest why that will be impactful for their success in the future, right? Or even
Yep.
their ability to make it through stumbles. You know, then you can always turn it around and say, yeah, okay, I stumbled this time, but I still have my why. I still need to do this for myself so that I can have, you know, the peace in the future that I want, or whatever it may be, right? So
Yeah.
it's always, for me, I stress the two things is the why, and be fucking honest with yourself about that why. Because like I said, I ask myself that question so many times, like, what the fuck am I even doing this for? You know? And I so
Yeah.
many times would just, oh, because I need to, like, no thought behind that answer for me. And
Yeah.
that's what kept like making me feel like I was losing motivation. So that's why I always stress, honestly tell yourself why. And sometimes you won't exactly have that answer at the beginning because it will take getting a little into it, even sometimes not even that long, but you'll have more of these why things develop in your mind. And those I personally use as motivation to move forward with confidence, right? And that's the important part is like, before I knew why, I was not confident about what I was doing. So even if someone were to
Mm-hmm.
ask me, I just, oh, I don't drink. And then I'd not say a word anymore about it because I'm not confident at all, right? It took knowing the why for me to even have any confidence about it. So that's another thing is that I say is like the confidence aspect can eliminate some struggle. Like nothing's going to eliminate
100%.
the whole struggle, but having a why, being honest with yourself will create enough confidence for you to move forward and hold to your convictions. And that's something that I've personally found for myself. So, I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of how I would, you know, what I would say to anyone in those two particular positions, right?
No, that's good because when you start asking yourself questions and you're serious about finding an answer, you will eventually find an answer. But it
Well,
was good having you on, Kris. We definitely got to do this again because we can talk about this shit for so fucking long. And then I was writing down different things that I wanted to talk about on this one. But I
oh
think
yeah.
I want to get you back on and we do like a story segment or something, and we can swap stories about back in the day and just what we learned from those stories, looking back on them or something like that. But I think there's a lot more we can cover in previous episodes. But really, really good in having you on. I think there's a lot of gold for people to jump on here and be able to listen to this and you know, take it and implement it for themselves. But just before we go, is there anywhere someone can follow you? Instagram, Facebook, anything like that?
Um, yeah. So Facebook is just Kris Nicholls. You can find me on there. I'm usually
Mm-hmm.
pretty receptive to people, that kind of thing, and that's where I share a lot of my my different things about life sort of deal, right? So that one
Yeah.
can get pretty wild once in a while, but then I like to on Instagram, it's at KrisNix23, so KrisNix 23. And on that
Heard
particular
it.
page, I share a lot of art-based stuff because for me, one of the things I've been getting really into is the power of therapeutic art. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I personally use it every single day, and it has
Mm-hmm.
been one of the things that's really gotten me, you know, into a good frame of mind. So I share a lot of things to look at on there that for me, I've kind of been working on a little thing called what I call little things, right? And for me, having just even a Rolodex of little things I can look at in periods of like, hard times sort of deal is like I can pull
Yeah.
out my phone and I've got a file thing that says little things on it. And when I really just need to center my mind or calm myself down a little bit, I've got a whole list of things I can scroll through. So I like to put a lot of that stuff there on the Instagram. And then I
Cool,
usually have
brother.
something motivational to say about it, quotes and that kind of thing too. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely, I definitely believe in the power of therapeutic art. So that's always there for the taking. So if anyone wants to follow, they're more than welcome. And like I said, my message boards are always open. So if even anyone wanted to reach out on there and ask me any questions, you're more than welcome to, because I'm always happy to help.
Awesome. That's good. So, yeah, that's all we got, guys. That's another episode of the Sober Spartan podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.